because this session is very interested by many people here in particularly in the ASEAN region in Asia, because there are so many informal sector housing here, and our professor here is the we may consider him a condo king, a slum king or something, who know a lot about this thing. So first, let me introduce Professor Yap Kioe Sheng. He is from Dutch, the Netherlands, and he already retired, but look like still working because very energetic. He was working in United Nations UNESCAP, and also before his retirement, he was the chief social protection and social justice section in the UNESCAP, in charge of the Center for Alleviation of Poverty, Alleviation of Poverty, and also he worked for Bogor in Indonesia. Bogor is the city south of Jakarta, that is part of the Jabodetabek. I mean the Jakarta and the metropolitan region area. And he was also teaching at the Asian Institute of Technology, and also Honorary Professor at the Cardiff School of City and Regional Planning at the Cardiff University. And as you may know, he wrote so many books and a large amount of articles related to housing and urban development. So this is our Professor Yap Kioe Sheng. So right now, Professor Yap Kioe Sheng, you may now it is 6 minutes past 3. So you can kindly start, and then in the next 45 minutes, there will be a Q&A. So right now you can just start for your lecture, or maybe for your teaching or something about this informal sector, how we can help solve this problem. Please, Professor.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
My first question, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
You can hear me?
Yes.
And you can see me? Okay.
But your voice maybe not so clear.
Not so clear. What can I do?
Oh, maybe you sit closer.
Closer.
Yeah.
I'm already sitting very close.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'll speak a little bit louder. Tell me if you can't hear me. Yeah.
Okay. Yes,
and
sir.
Sorry for the delay. I had asked to first have 6 slides. I didn't make a PowerPoint presentation because there was no time for it, but I now 6 to 8 slides. Can your staff put that on the screen first so that we know what I'm talking about? Sopon? Can you share the screen?
That screen. You like to share your screen, right? Okay. Share screen. Yeah. You want us to share your screen, or you want to share screen yourself, sir?
You promised you would do the screen, but if you don't, I have to do it myself.
Okay, I will help you share the screen. One moment. So we share your screen now, sir.
I don't know. I'm trying to. Sorry.
We share your screen already on the screen now. It is on the screen now. Upgrading informal settlements. You just told me to change the slides. I will help you change.
Okay, I will tell you to change. Okay, so Sopon asked me to tell you about the book that I wrote recently, Upgrading Informal Settlements. I just wanted to show you a few slides to show you what informal settlements are. Can I see the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is an informal settlement in Yangon, in Myanmar, as you can see, very poor environment. Next one.
In Yangon, Myanmar. Look like in Thailand also.
Yes. So next slide.
This is
also an informal settlement, but very different. This is in Karachi, Pakistan. This is Orangi with 1 million inhabitants.
Oh,
Next
why
slide.
why high story? Why multi-story, sir?
Yeah, I'll come to that.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yes. Oh, Mumbai.
This is Mumbai. This is Dharavi. You see multi-storied slum.
I see. How come?
Again, there are 1 million people living in this particular settlement, which is in the heart of Mumbai. Yeah, and this is very valuable land. So next slide. Next slide.
Yes. Yes.
So this is from Bloomberg News just 2 weeks ago. The richest man in India wants to develop this land and build offices, shopping malls, and condominiums. But there are 1 million people living there. So they are afraid they will be moved out of that area. It's not only just 1 million people, there are thousands of small and medium enterprises. So it's a very complicated operation. And I fear that the people, the poor people that live there will be the victims of this development. I'll come back to that also. Next slide. No, the next one. This is going backwards, going forwards. Yeah. Now this is kind of upgrading informal settlements. And you can see, not so fast. Go back. You can see from the earlier slide, you replace the wooden walkways with concrete. Going backwards, go back, go back. You replace the wooden walkways with concrete walkways. It looks better. First of all, the children won't in the water below the walkways, so that's good. But there are also economic advantages to just build these concrete walkways. People in Cambodia told us, if we don't have these walkways, then we have to leave our motorcycle on the main road and it could be stolen, or we have to pay for the guards and it costs us money. So now with the concrete walkways, we can take them home. So there is a small advantage. More importantly, if you have the walkways in concrete, you can supply the shops within the settlement, deep into the settlement. And so the shopkeepers have a better condition. So there are all sorts of small advantages to upgrading settlements. While when you redevelop the area into shopping malls, a lot is lost. Okay, next one.
This little boy.
This little boy. This is a picture that was on the internet some time ago, and we really don't know what the origin of it is. But imagine, this little boy is doing his homework by the light of McDonald's. So he must have been told, work hard and you will do better. If this little boy lived in a slum, we don't know where he lives, we assume it's Manila, but we don't know where he lives. If this little boy had electricity at home and a more quiet room in his house, he would even do better. So these are small improvements that can have large impacts. And so I argue in my book that upgrading informal settlements is a form of human development. It improves the conditions that make people have a better future. Okay, last slide.
Yes.
So this is the book. So we can end this PowerPoint presentation and let me just talk directly to you. Yeah?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Okay, now, let me now make my presentation. When I wrote this book, I wrote it for people who work in slums, who work to improve the conditions in slums. And the book is about ideas, how to do it, the problems that you encounter, the experiences in various countries, how to improve. Now, when I wrote it, I also felt that it's important to know for those people who work in slums that slum improvement is not considered to be a good idea by everybody. There's a lot of opposition to the idea of improving slums. Opposition comes, of course, first of all, from the landowners who are afraid that if you improve slums, they will lose their land forever and vacant land will be occupied and improved and they will lose it. That's one opposition. Local governments don't like it because they like to develop cities that are attractive to visitors, to investors, and slums, and even improved slums, are not attractive to visitors. A third group of people are the middle class, who always are afraid that their property will lose value if you have slums nearby, even improved slums. And a fourth opposition comes from the real estate developers. I guess people like you, people like Sopon and others, who see that land off where slums are could be developed much better, make a lot more money than if you simply have housing for the poor. Yeah, but the poor have to live somewhere. And that is my concern. So the real estate developer, in a way, is my opponent in this. You can stop the PowerPoint presentation. In a way, the real estate developer is an opponent to this. So I changed some of my presentation to fit you people. And I think that there are things to be learned from slum improvement, may be useful for private sector developers if they would be interested in going into a down market trend and into low-income housing. Now, at the moment, the private sector is not really into low-income housing. And I can understand that. I can see that the profit margins are small, that there's enough demand for the middle class, from the middle class, and that when they get involved, their housing, their private sector housing, does not match the needs of the poor. So there's very little, if any, private sector developers in housing for the poor. And that leaves this sector to the government, the public sector. And what the public sector does very often is to build very large housing estates, many thousands of apartments, all small apartments in a very remote location. And nobody is happy with that. It doesn't meet the demands of the urban poor. What the private developers do what is the strength of private sector housing? Strength of the market is that you have a diversity of supply by many different companies in many different locations offering many different types of housing. That is why the market works so reasonably well. When it comes to low-income housing, you see the opposite. The public sector builds all the same kind of units in very few locations, in very large estates, in very bad remote locations where there's no employment. So that is where I'm saying we could learn from upgrading informal settlements if the private sector gets involved in low-income housing. What we need is many different actors involved in supplying housing of different types in different locations for different arrangements, ownership as well as rental. And for that, private sector as well as the public sector need to unlearn and relearn the market, because we think we as a middle class, and we're in a way all middle class, think that the middle class norms and conditions also apply to the poor. And that is not true. The poor have diverse housing preferences, but they have very small margins of trade-offs because they have such a low income. So we need to learn from the urban poor about the kind of housing that they need and see how we can supply that kind of housing. And it's not easy. One of the key lessons of upgrading informal settlements is that income and employment is crucial. Relocation, like we see in Mumbai, means loss of income, loss of employment, and therefore doesn't benefit the poor. We need to think about housing that incorporates income generating opportunities that may be not according to the regulations of the city or the zoning laws or whatever, but that's one essential element, characteristic of low-income housing that the poor need. So we need to think about how can we make sure that people not only are better housed, like the little boy, but also that they have income and employment at the same time. Now, let me give you an anecdotal evidence. I assume Sopon said you're mainly from Southeast Asia. So you know the Chinese shopkeeper who sleeps behind the counter with his family among his stock. And his shop is open 24/7 because he wants to make sure that if there's a customer, he can sell. Yeah. At the same time, there is this woman, let's say, the woman next door wakes up in the middle of the night with a headache. It happens. She can go to that shop because it's open 24/7 and buy one single piece of paracetamol. She doesn't buy a strip of 10 paracetamol, she buys one because she cannot invest in 10 pieces of paracetamol, although she pays more per piece. She buys one and the shopkeeper sells one. You can't do that in 7-Eleven or in any other convenience store. Yeah, the shop meets her needs and the shopkeeper makes some money. The same applies to water supply. Many slum dwellers buy their water from private vendors. Why is that? Because if you are connected to the public utility, if you don't pay for a month, they can disconnect you and you don't have water. The private water vendor will come every day. And if you don't have money, you can tell him, sorry, today no water because I have no money. And the private vendor may say, don't worry, okay, I can come back tomorrow, or even I can sell you water on credit because I live on the other side of the street from you, and your children play with my children. I know you. I trust you. You can buy water on credit, or you can even get it for free. Yeah? This is not possible with a public utility. You can't negotiate with them. Mostly, you can't. So what poor people do is they replace the financial capital that you and I have with social capital. They build on social relationships with their neighbors and with other people, and exchange goods and services because they don't have the money for that. Yeah, it's like the mother who knocks on the door of the neighbor and says to the neighbor, can you look after my child for an hour because I have to do some shopping? She's not going to call Uber and say, I want to have a nanny for an hour. That's not how it works. Social relationships are critical to how the poor live and work. So flexibility in the infrastructure is critical. Flexibility in housing is critical. You can build a house, buy a house, modify a house, rent a room, build a room. In an informal settlement, you can pay by month, by week, by day. For the bed, you can pay by hour. There's no zoning, there are no regulations. There's no limitations on house size and plot size and etc. Now, is this good? No, but it matches the demand of the poor. So replicating those circumstances in formal housing, in housing that the public sector or the private sector builds, is not easy. You have to think about how can we bring in that flexibility? How can we adjust the standards and the regulations to make it feasible for the poor to have that kind of housing? If we do that, and if we continue building housing that meets the middle class norms and standards and regulations, then there is no housing for the poor. And what the poor then will do is build their own housing, disregarding rules and regulations. So this is the dilemma that we're in. And this problem is immense. Yeah, I just looked up the statistics. The latest numbers are from 2020, which is basically before COVID. And in the world, 1 billion people lived in slums. 1 billion, 1,000 million people. So it's an enormous problem. And we need the inputs, the involvement of everybody, public sector, private sector, informal sector, etc., to see if we can solve or at least reduce this problem. Yeah, but we need to understand how the poor live and how the poor work. And until now, I have used the word slum and used the word slum improvement when I talked about upgrading informal settlements. But I don't like the word slum. When people think about slum, they think about bad things. Yeah, and they often think if this housing is bad, then the people who live in that housing must be bad. They must be criminals and drug addicts and sex workers, etc. So I like to make the distinction between slums as formal structures that are deteriorating in order for them to be demolished by the owner and redeveloped for shopping malls, etc. So that's a downward trend of the slums versus informal settlements built by the people who want to improve their lives and improve their housing, improve their financial and economic situation. So those are informal settlements which have an upward trend. Many of the poor are ambitious. They come to the city to improve themselves, to secure a future for their children. And we all know that urban education is the path to a better future for the child, rather than rural education. Nobody wants to go as a teacher. So people come to the city in the hope of giving a better future for themselves and for their children. And I was now talking about formal education, but the whole city is a learning environment. People learn technical skills, learn entrepreneurial skills. A friend of mine is a vendor in the street around the corner from here. She's food in the street that she makes in the street. But she's 5 people working for her. And I tell her, you're not a food vendor, you're a CEO. You're a CEO of a startup. If she had some venture capital, she could start a restaurant. Yeah. But of course, she is not bankable in her activities. But people in the slums, I keep talking about slums, but in the settlements are ambitious to improve themselves and to improve their housing. Now, there's obviously slums like the one that are being shown now are not ideal. This is no good, yeah? But it matches the needs of the people that live there. And if we give them certain support, certain inputs, they can improve things by themselves. Yeah, rather than demolishing slums, which doesn't help anybody, it's better to improve. Now, what's wrong with these slums? You think the slums, the problem of the slums is the poor housing, but there are 2 problems which are more important. One is people don't have land rights. Now, you know, they occupy that land, not not buying or paying rent to the owner. So they lack land rights and they can be evicted at any time. And that means that they don't want to invest too much in their housing, which keep the housing poor. Similarly, because they don't have land rights, the authorities don't want to provide infrastructure. So there's a lack of water supply, drainage, sanitation, roads, waste collection. And the government could do something to change that if they would recognize the settlement. So upgrading would mean preserving the investment people have already made, physical improvements, socioeconomic improvements, and then bringing in what is needed, infrastructure and security of tenure. Now, when planners and engineers go into a settlement, they will say, oh, this is terrible. We need wider roads, we need square plots or rectangular plots, we need to change everything. Well, if we change everything, then the poor have lost whatever they had. Upgrading requires that we look at the standards and the regulations and try to preserve as much of what people already have. So what we need to do to improve upgrading informal settlements is to talk to people. And where real estate developers do market research to find out the kind of housing that people need and want, when you do slum improvement, you also do market research, but you're talking to people who are already on site and try to learn what the people need, what the people want, while the people learn to realize what the planners and the engineers need and want. And we need to accept that people in the slums have different needs and demands. Even within the household, a man and a woman have different ideas. The man may be the boss, but he spends perhaps a lot of the time outside the settlement, going to work somewhere else. The woman have to manage the house and the settlement and spend most of her time at home. So her interests, her needs are far more important than those of the man. So you need to listen to the man and to the women, to the owners and to the renters. This means that upgrading is a labor-intensive and an open-ended process where people need to learn from each other to fully understand what can be done. Now I come back to the private sector, because financing has always been a big problem in upgrading informal settlements. If you have 1 billion people living in slums, then you need a lot of money to create even the most basic conditions. So in a few countries, the government has invited the private sector to get into this slum improvement business by saying, we're dividing up the land into 2 parts. One part is for the people who live in the slum and will be resettled on site. The other part is for the private developer who can build commercial development and use part of the profit that he makes with this development for the market to pay for the housing for the poor. That looks like a good match, because the poor can stay on site. Things have to change a bit, but they can stay on site, they can stay in their community. But what happens is that very often, because of the high densities, the poor still have to be rehoused in high-rise buildings, which does not match their needs. Secondly, because the financing from the private sector is so important, very often the interest of the developer, the private sector development, are more important than the priorities of the poor. And so the commercial development becomes overarching and the housing for the poor becomes a residual issue. Also, the private developer doesn't like to have too many poor people living next door to his commercial development. So it's a difficult combination to make, but it can be done. So to end this, we're almost there. Upgrading the living conditions in the slums is important for people to escape poverty and to help their children to escape poverty. If we improve the health of the people and the children, they can contribute more to the economic development in the city, which will help them to escape poverty. Imagine the immense economic contribution that the poor make to the city with their goods and services, not just for the poor, but also for the middle class. Life would be a lot more expensive if the poor are not there to provide goods and services, and the city would be a lot dirtier also. So the authorities must take into consideration the interests of the poor and their children, and the public or the private sector, whoever is involved, must take into account the specific diverse housing needs of the poor when it comes to location, regulation and standards, flexibility, social capital, home-based enterprises, etc. Now, what we need is to find solutions together that can do this, that can help people escape from a living condition that you see right now there in Mumbai, but still save their income and employment opportunities, save their social networks, their social capital, and help them with a healthier life. So that's the message that comes from my book. And I hope that the private sector can make a contribution, although I'm not quite clear what that contribution is. When we look at this proposal by Mr. Adani, who is the richest man in India, he probably is going to build just offices, shopping malls, and condominiums. And many of the poor who live in that settlement and who have work in that settlement, who earn income in that settlement, will just be told, leave. At the best, they will be sent to the outskirts of the city where there's no employment, no income generating opportunities. And maybe they are given small apartments in high-rise buildings, but then cannot do the work that they used to do here, where in this slum now, there are thousands of small and medium enterprises that do all sorts of work for the city. Question is, can we save that? Can we save the location? Because private developers know location is the critical issue. That's the same for the poor. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That is Professor Yap Kioe Sheng, my professor, but he looked younger than me. And before we go on for the Q&A, I saw my past world president, Mr. Florentino Dulalia, my big brother. I remember that we went to Houston together in 2004 to get the membership of FIABCI at that time, 2004. And then he became the world president of FIABCI, Mr. Dulalia. And we supposed to have the World Congress in Manila in 2020. Unfortunately, COVID-19 came, so we could not do the World Congress in Manila. That is a pity indeed. I love to be in Manila as well. And I hope to go to Manila again this coming September. Some governmental agency invited me to speak there. But since our Mr. Dulalia, our world president is here, President Dulalia, do you have any words to greeting to our members and our people here? We have here around 45 or something people, 47 people here. And in Facebook fan page of FIABCI Thai, we have around 120. I don't know why many people like Facebook rather than in Zoom. Maybe they don't want to be to show their own face or something. So many of us are in Facebook fan page FIABCI Thai. So Mr. Dulalia, President Dulalia, do you have any greeting to our Professor Yap Kioe Sheng and other people here? Mr. Dulalia, are you there? Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Sopon. Well, congratulations to our speaker. Indeed, a very good one. And Ms. Dr. Sopon, let's give chance to others because I have a problem in my throat. Give others a chance to ask questions. Thank you. Regards to all.
Yeah, thank you, sir. We in Thailand, we have our FIABCI Thailand and developed something like the Excellence Award and some other thing we learned from the Philippines. So this is some great credit for the Philippines. Thank you very much, Mr. Dulalia and our other colleagues from the Philippines FIABCI. Professor Yap Kioe Sheng, I'd like to ask you one question. And if anyone want to have any question, you can write or maybe you can say something. The first question is, in accordance to your assessment, do you think informal housing like slums or squatter settlements in the world, is it growing or is it shrinking? Or what is your opinion or the fact in the world? Is it growing on the average or on the whole? Or is it shrinking? What is your opinion, sir?
Well, first of all, we have to think about COVID. COVID has changed everything. Eh?
Oh.
And the data that we have are mainly from before COVID. And what we saw was that in many countries, poverty went down. In Thailand, it went down. In China, it went down a lot. So poverty went down, but in absolute numbers, people living in slums increased.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and what COVID has done is increase poverty. So it's very likely that there are more people living in slums. I would like to say something in addition, and that is what we're now talking about is climate change. Everybody talks about climate change. If we have climate change and we have sea level rise, then the first places that will go underwater are the informal settlements. And so people will lose their house. People will be there, but the house will be lost. And if we have droughts in the rural areas, we will have poor people coming from the rural areas to the city looking for housing and in informal settlements. And as sea levels rise, the land area will become smaller and the poor people in the city will become larger. So the problem is still there, although in Thailand, I think the number of people in slums have gone down because Thai government has done a reasonably good job.
I see. The second question, sir. You say something about the relocation to remote areas, and we all see that it is not successful to do that, to relocate them far away from the city, and they have to sneaking back to the city, and that it may be inappropriate solution for that. So according to your experience, what should be done for slum dwellers in the city? What is the successful case that we should do so that we have a good solution and appropriate solution for slum dwellers or supporters in the city? Kindly tell us.
Yeah, so I don't think there's one solution. Yeah, upgrading, like I have explained today, upgrading is one option. Yeah, and it fits certain people, but not everybody and not every settlement. Public housing in the periphery is not a problem for certain people, but is a big problem for other people. Yeah, I sometimes talk about the couple without children who both have a low-paying job in the government and can take public transport for free. For them, a small apartment in the periphery is not a big problem. But if you have a push cart and are selling food on the streets, and there's nobody to, if the market for your inputs is far away, and there are not many customers to buy your food, then you have a problem, and you can't really operate a shop on the 15th floor of a high-rise building. Yeah, so my ideal low-income housing program would be all across the city. You have in many different locations, small projects of different types of housing so that people can have a choice of going here or going there if they have to leave the slum or the slum cannot be upgraded. Different options for different people. And the private sector could play a role in that. I was just thinking before this presentation, a building that would be a shopping mall with small shops that sell goods, where the poor can sell goods, but where at the same time they can live behind the shop, behind the counter, as we talked about, would be perhaps acceptable in the center of the city, because you could develop other things on top of it, or next to it, or behind it, or in front of it. Yeah, can we combine living and working? Now we talk a lot about working from home. This is a different kind of working from home. Can we develop buildings that offer working at home, home-based enterprises, where people can earn an income and live in a more structured environment with the necessary infrastructure? And that from the outside doesn't look like a slum, not a vertical slum, and that will not be a mismatch with the surrounding structures. Yeah, so I see different kinds of options in different parts of the city, hopefully kind of infill in between other developments into other neighborhoods that would be acceptable to the other residents and to the local government
I
and
see.
to the landowners.
Thank you, sir. Let me also thank Madam Julie, FIABCI Philippines, who helped us a lot for FIABCI Thai. And we have Madam Melinda Litt, who invited me to the Philippines last month, and also our leader in real estate in the Philippines as well. And another question is that how real estate developers or housing developers in different countries help doing more supplies for the slum dwellers. I saw many low-cost housing by private sector in the Philippines. They even built up below, say, 18 square meters for an apartments, and owner-occupy apartments of 18 square meters or 16 square meters, so that they can sell to the low-income people or lower mid-income people, and some do social housing. Or in Thailand, we also have private developer doing that. Any suggestion for private housing developers to do low-cost housing or social housing for slum dwellers, so that we can screen some of them who may have affordability enough to be in an open market? Any idea on this, Professor Yap Kioe Sheng, for the role of the private developers to help for slum dwellers or squatter settlements? Please, Professor.
Yeah, so as I said, there's not one option, but one of the first things that private developers could do or should do is to see how far down market they can go, to what extent they can build housing for lower middle, yeah, or less poor people. Yeah, that's very important. The second is, as you also refer to, a problem is gentrification. If you build quality housing and the lower middle or the middle income people are not properly housed, they will take over the low income housing that you built for the poor. So we need to be careful. We need to build sufficient housing for the middle income people to prevent the gentrification of the low income housing. That's not easy, but it's an important consideration. And so the second one is go down market as far as possible. See how far you can reach down market while still making sufficient profit for yourself, because that's why you're in business. Yeah. The third is certain types of people, like private sector formal housing. Like I said, apartments, small apartments, you say 18 square meters. 18 square meters is very small. Yeah, that's my room here. But okay, if people want to do that, yeah.
Yes, sir.
But there are people who cannot afford even that. They cannot afford to buy, plus the rental, the regular rental payments and the payments of the utilities at a monthly basis is not something that they can afford. So you need to find other options as well. And I don't know if it's within the scope of what the private sector can do.
There is a question, sir. They said from Mr. Burns said that, can you cite example, raise some example of successful slum developments in other countries? If there is any, how long did it take them to develop this slum community into a well-developed communities? So let me repeat again.
No, I got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
any example of successful development, sir?
Well, there are many examples of successful projects and programs. It's just not enough to meet the needs of 1 billion people. Indonesia had a very good kampong improvement program, yeah, that started in the late 60s and ended in the late 80s. And the government brought in infrastructure in the kampongs. And that last picture, not this picture, but one of the last pictures shows a kampong, an improved kampong. Yeah, Thailand has done good work in improving riverbank settlements, negotiating with the agency that is responsible for the riverbank and who wants a clear path to clean the canals or the rivers. And so people have moved up a little bit. They still live at the same place, but not obstructing the cleaning of the canal or the river. So there are options there. Sri Lanka had some good slum improvement projects or programs in the 80s. It's just that they never really last, because at a certain point, the pressure from the government, from
So
the
in
class,
Surabaya, the photo that
yeah,
you show
yeah.
me, is this also a successful case, sir?
Yeah, this is a successful case.
No.
And one of you see the pavement has been made. I don't know what it looked like before, so I cannot tell you. But the pavement has been made. Once you have that pavement, you can put in water supply, electricity, drainage. Yeah, and the important thing that you see here is that people have become proud of their settlement, proud of their housing with all the colors and the plants, because the government has recognized it. Yeah. So
in Karachi, the photo that I just showed you here, that you said they are elevated slums. It doesn't look like slum, but they are crowded. It's different from typical slum in Yangon, typical slum in Thailand. So how this is a slum or something? Can you explain about this community in Karachi, Pakistan?
Well, first of all, of course, this is a Muslim country. Yeah, and Muslim families want to have a sort of closed housing situation, yeah, where the women can stay inside the house without being seen by the outsiders. Secondly, this slum is so big and these people have so many votes that at a certain moment, the mayor of Karachi came from the slum because he could be elected by the slum dwellers of the city. There were so many. And obviously, if you have a settlement like this with 1 million people, there's no way you can demolish it because you cannot provide an alternative. And so people there have a high level of security of tenure. It's very unlikely that they will be bulldozed. Yeah, so they start investing in their house, which shows that if you have the opportunity, you can improve your housing. The main problem here, as you can see, is not the quality of the house. It's the road pattern, the layout of the settlement, yeah, which may make it difficult to provide infrastructure. But then, do you really need car access to all those places, or is it sufficient to have access to certain places? Yeah, do you need to widen all the roads, or can you say no? We have certain points where the waste is collected by the municipality or by the people themselves. Yeah. So yeah, this is a very different situation, mainly because the people feel secure. They are not afraid of being evicted by the authorities. And this is public land. Yeah. So there is not really an alternative. This is desert. There's no alternative there. While the one in Yangon is on the riverbed. So it's not possible to make it permanent. So there are different situations. While Sopon is busy, I can also say, even in China, you have slums, so you have informal settlements, because you have rural villages that have been absorbed by the city. You can see that in many of the big cities of China, that there are areas where there was rural life. The fields where there was agriculture have been taken over by the city, but the residential area of those villages have remained occupied by the farmers who develop that land and for rental housing and rent them out to migrants. But they don't follow the building regulations. They don't follow the standards. Sometimes buildings collapse, same in India. But it provides housing, multi-storied housing for migrants who cannot buy formally a house in the city. Are you with me, Sopon? Cannot hear you. Yes.
Out. You say something about the shopping centers when they build this. So this means that right now there are a lot of eviction or something. Is there a lot of eviction in the world? The rate of eviction is higher compared to the past or not? The rate of eviction, is it a lot more compared to the past or not? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So what is your opinion about the threat of eviction? Right now, are there many more threat of eviction in the world, in maybe in Asian region?
Well, in the Asian region, when you look at the big cities, the mega cities like Bangkok or Jakarta or Manila, land is highly valuable. Yeah, and the urban poor cannot compete with a real estate developer for the land that they occupy. Yeah, so as I said at the beginning, there is a lot of opposition to keeping the slum where it is. The question is, what counts more, the money or the people?
I see. So the map that I show you right now, you are familiar surely. This is the Queen Sirikit National Convention Center, this big one. And here is the hospital, very private hospital, very expensive one. And this is this is the office building. We call the park or something. Yeah, this is a big office building. You can see the building really beautiful. And at the back is the rows of apartments, and that is the row that apartment built for slum people in this area. Formerly, they occupy the whole area. So we have some land sharing here. This may be considered a successful case or something, sir.
Well, it's a reasonably successful case. I just would like to know how many of the original people in that slum still live there in those apartments.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be a measure of success. This is a possible land sharing example. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's if you could show what's the other one?
Where is it, sir?
Sorry, I'm getting too old to remember all the names.
This is another one, sir.
Can you show Manakasila?
Ban Manangkasila.
Yeah.
Let me check, but I will show you. I show you this. This is another case study that you teach us here. This is a slum that they built a high rise for slum dwellers in this area. This is also a good successful case, right? That they build high rise for the slum people here. But maybe we have to examine whether the original slum dwellers are still here or not, or maybe they run away, they just sold the project, the units or not. But this is also a big investment for slum people in this area. This may be a good case.
Let me give you another example from Bangkok. As you know, we did a survey that's already some time ago of housing for the poor by the National Housing Authority. And these apartments were built in the 80s. So they are now in the center of the city almost, because the city has expanded a lot. And 60% of the occupants then, that's 25 years ago, were not poor people. They were middle-income people paying highly subsidized rents of $10 a month. Yeah, so there was a high level of gentrification because the poor people couldn't fit their work, their income generating activities in these apartments. And so they sold their right to these rental apartments to middle-income people, while the rents remain more or less the same, $10. Yeah, so the subsidies, because the market value was something like 1,500. Sorry,
there is Miss Linarisa Haron said that Professor has given a lot of deep thoughts, mostly relating to humanity. Thank you. So if location is unique to get solution, so what are the main principles in upgrading informal settlements? So what are the main principles upgrading for informal settlements? But before you answer this question, as you request, this is the Ban Manangkasila. This is a big mansion, and at the below, behind the big mansion, these are the some land sharing something here. So this is the project that you mentioned, sir, in the hub of the city, nearby the parliaments or something.
Yeah. So what is interesting there is that people shared the land with the commercial developer. So they got a very small piece of land to live on, and they got 23 square meter plots, which is below normal standards, 20 square meter plots. And they built, was it 2.5 story shop houses? Yeah. So they found a solution to stay on site, build shop houses with very limited car access. There is some car access, but it's not easy.
Yeah, you see this is a map, the street view of these 3 stories. So each each one one story, one units or something, right?
No, it's one unit for 2.5 stories, but of course you can
the 2.5
rent out.
story.
Yeah.
Now the unit
So
is
this
quite
is-
small.
It shows that if you relax the standards, relax the building regulations, you could accommodate the people in a small area while still giving them the opportunity to do their income generation. Yeah, because this is a very centrally located area, very near to a very big market, and lots of people that live here or work here and produce things here, go to the market to sell, yeah, or go to the market to buy. So you have to find solutions like this. Now, nobody wants the whole of Bangkok built on 20 square meter plots.
No.
Yeah, 23 square meter plots, that would be impossible. But
Yeah.
this small area with small plots, but still, if you have 2.5 floors, so that is, let's say 50 square meter of floor area, is still an acceptable area to live and to work. So you have to find these small solutions.
I see. And this is the office of the community center. Office of the community centers. I see. So according to the answer, the question that Ms. Linarisa said that what are the main principles in upgrading informal settlements?
Well, one principle is stay on site. Sorry, because if you stay on site, you keep the investments that the people have already made in their house, in their employment or their work, and in their socioeconomic relations, the social capital. The second is you need to have participation in planning and decision making, because if you don't do that, then it doesn't work. Then the people will tell the planners and the engineers, you better get out of here. We don't want you. We prefer to live like we have been doing for the last so many years. If you want to improve, you have to take into account our needs and our conditions. And of course, we as slum dwellers will take into account your requirements. Yeah, not everything is possible when it comes to infrastructure. Yeah, water pipes or sanitation and toilets. You need to find solutions that are acceptable to both sides. So participation is a very important part of upgrading. Staying on site is important. Security of tenure, meaning taking away the threat of eviction. It doesn't mean that we want these improved slums to be there for the next 100 years. We hope that in 100 years' time, people will not be that poor and will have moved to better housing. Yeah, and even if we hope we can see that the land of these slums may be used for other more important uses than the housing for these people, if we can find alternative solutions. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
But I think the participation, which has all sorts of also benefits. Imagine when you put an illiterate woman from the slum opposite an engineer with a PhD from MIT in the US together around the table, then what do you see? What kind of dynamics will develop? Yeah, of course, the engineer will say, I know everything and you know nothing. And the illiterate woman will say, now I know the real life and you only know what you learned in school. If you're both open, then you can find solutions that are beneficial to both sides.
Thank you, sir. I think for the time being, allow me to do some advertisement.
Yes.
This is our Asia Pacific Real Estate Convention and FIABCI Thai Prix Salon Awards. I hope I pronounce correctly. Asia Pacific Real Estate Convention and FIABCI Thai Prix Texalong Awards. This will happen in October, on October 5 to 7 this year, next 2 months at the Berkeley Hotel, Patu Nam. So you are invited to join here. For Professor Yap, if October 6th at the night we have gala dinner, black tie, but you can wear anything if you like. You are our guest if you are free on that day. And this you can see that there will be discussion. Say on October 5 and 6, there will be exhibition and also discussion on the path to be #1 real estate development. We have big developers like Mr. Dulalia and others to say something, and how to become #1 and independent real estate agents. This is also very interesting, and fruitful experience in cross-border real estate investment. And so October the 6th, we also have another session, several sessions as well. So these are what we have in the past. And October 7th, you may talk with the exhibitors who have a booth in our convention. You may talk to them to visit their projects or something. Last year, a couple of 2 Filipinos, 2 men also went up country to see projects of our clients or something. So it depends on your negotiation or the discussion with them. And this is the event that we have in the past. And this is the venue. You see, the venue is really big. Last year, we have it in Amari Watergate. And sometimes we have it in some other hotels. But this one is Berkeley Hotel. This is in the hub of the shopping areas. So you can do a lot of shopping. This is the event last year. These ladies came from Malaysia. She is a surveyor, the president of the Surveyor Association, something. And this is the award last year. I also wear some black tie, and those who get the awards. And we have it in 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Even we have COVID-19, we can still do it on site, even in COVID period. So this is quite amazing. So this year will be the 5th consecutive years for our gala dinner and award on this. And if you come here, gala dinner and convention, 2 days of convention, lunches, coffee breaks, and 4 coffee breaks, 2 lunches, and 1 dinner, gala dinner only 180, or only gala dinner alone, or maybe an exhibitors. So you can choose. So you can kindly join us for this. Okay, I see one chat that maybe the rest, the last question. Oh, Miss Haron said that, oh, interesting. Thank you so much, Professor. Oh, so no problem, no more question anymore. Any last words for you, Professor Yap Kioe Sheng? Any concluding remarks or something before we end our session? Please, Professor Yap.
It was a pleasure talking to you. I don't know who I talked to. That's the problem with Zoom, I guess. I see some pictures. I hope it has been interesting. I even hope it has been useful. I always start with a challenge for architects, engineers, real estate developers. There is a lot that should be done for housing the urban poor. How it is done, we need to work together to find effective solutions, taking into account that the poor have their specific needs and interests and conditions. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for your kind help. And I think there should be no more question and discussion. But one thing I would like to inform you is that this is one of the first session that we have for this month. Actually, this is August the 3rd. So we have this event. And the next one will be August 28th. There will be our speakers to discuss as well. And then we also have, this is something about the relocation, August 28, and we also have the professor from the International Association of Assessing Officers to say something about the how to assess and tax personal properties. If you have a yacht, you have a car, how to tax personal properties. This is also very interesting. And my friend, Dr. Yap Kioe, Dr. Ang Sang Kyung, he will say something about the urban planning. And we also have the president of the International Association of Assessing Officers, the past one, Mr. Wayne Llewellyn. He is from Canada. He will speak something about the politics and property prices, because in Canada there are a lot of disputes in politics, something that is in the case of Canada. We also have Mr. Takahiro Kainuma, Mr. Kainuma from Japan, Tokyo Construction. He will say something about the vacant housing or unoccupied housing in Japan. In Japan now they have around 8.5 million unoccupied housing. How they can manage this? And last but not least, we also have Professor But to say something about property prices and war in Peshawar, Pakistan. Yeah, so this thing that are interesting. This is the role of our FIABCI World Council of Experts. Experts mean something about urban planning, architecture, or researchers, or something related to real estate. We have Council of Brokers. We have Council of Valuers. We have Council of Property Managers. We have Council of Developers and Council of Property Technology. But our Council of Experts are the conglomeration of many things. So these are the roles that we done, and we will have this until the end of the year. So we will have altogether around 7 events. So I will inform you soon, and you may follow us in the FIABCI Thai, the fan page of FIABCI Thai, or maybe you can send some email to us. Whenever we have any event, we will inform you soon. Okay. So today it is around 4:22 in Bangkok already. We're supposed to have 1 hour. So this is more than 1 hour, almost 90 minutes, 80 minutes now. So we should end. So let us thanks Professor Yap Kioe Sheng for his contribution. You are very kind to us. So thank you very much, Professor Yap Kioe Sheng. All the best to you, and have a good evening and good day to all. See you later. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor, and all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sopon.
Thank you, sir.